Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have back with us Jordan Mangaliman, who is a Fiduciary Retirement Advisor and founder of GoldLine Wealth Management. We'll be talking today about building a retirement plan that you can depend on. Jordan, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Hey, I think that I'm one that I'm almost like a wordsmith. I love analyzing and assessing words, and I love how you've titled this talk "Building a Retirement Plan" because it takes some effort. You can't just slap something together and hope for the best, and building a retirement plan that you can depend on that has that solid foundation. So I want to dive right into that. Talk a little bit about why it's so important to actually build a retirement plan you can depend on, and then what are some of those risks to the plan?
Sure. So when crafting a retirement plan, you really have to build it out and flesh it out. Sometimes retirees get stuck kind of putting the pieces together like MacGyver. They're kind of duct taping something that hopefully this sticks, right?
Yep.
But again, this is one of the biggest transitions in your life. And ultimately, when you have education and knowledge, we believe knowledge is power. An educated investor is a better investor, right? And we want to make sure you have the right knowledge so that you can build a plan that fits you and is custom tailored to you, not some cookie cutter downloadable PDF that you found online, but something that speaks to your unique position and your unique goals, right? So the 6 major risks are in retirement. These are the risks that essentially all retirees face, some more than others, but definitely if you don't address these 6, I promise you at one point they will rear its head, right? And at that point, it's a little too late to plan for because it's there on your doorstep. The first one is longevity, right? We mentioned earlier is you're going to live longer and longer, not shorter and shorter. That's the statistic, right? For a married couple, age 60, at least one of them has a chance of living to age 95, a 43% chance of living to age 95. So if we have a chance of living a long life, doesn't it make sense for our investments to reflect that through proper income source planning and ways to fight inflation in the future, right? So having the right tools to address income. And that's where you compile through our software. Well, I have rental income, I have Social Security, I might have my husband's pension. Maybe that's enough, maybe it's not. Well, now we have to supplement with other accounts, whether that's a dividend portfolio, annuities, alternative investments. That's how we address longevity, right? That's the first one. The second one is mortality, which is to say if you or your partner were to pass away prematurely, what's the effect on your retirement income picture, right? We know your retirement income is going to go down. At minimum Social Security, you're only going to get to keep one check, right? How is that going to affect your retirement experience as the surviving spouse? So mortality has to be addressed. That's the second one. Look, the third one is liquidity, which I don't think enough retirees are planning for, right? Liquidity is to say, well, I have all my investments locked in, but we know unexpected emergencies take place time and time again. We see it almost every month. Oh, I got to do some repairs on my roof, right? That's going to cost $20,000. We got to model that in that liquidity in. Or, hey, my car pooped out and I got to get a new car, right? So we got to model that in. Another liquidity situation you might face is long-term care, right? Or medical expenses, right? That's a huge one. Long-term care today in California, at least the national average is around $8,000 to $10,000 a month. So you're talking about $120,000 a year expense. The average stays 4 to 5 years. So we're talking about $500,000 expense. How do we pay for something like that, right? The main question I get is the government going to pay for it? Well, technically, yes. The old rule was if you had $2,000 or less in assets, majority of the people that we work with are not in that state, right? They're going to have more money than that. So they have to be vigilant on preparing for a liquidity need like long-term care. Yeah. Whether that's paying out of pocket, out of your portfolio, or getting an insurance policy to plan for that, it has to be addressed. Liquidity, number 3. Number four is inflation. That's the fourth risk. We know that a dollar today is not going to be the same as a dollar in 10 years, right? The last 111-year average for inflation is about 3.6%. 3.6%, right? What's the effect of inflation on your portfolio? But we've also seen inflation shoot through the roof, like the oil embargo in the 70s and 80s, where inflation went up 9 to 11%, right? What's the effect on your dollar during those years, or right after COVID? We saw inflation spike at over 7%. Things have mellowed out, sure, but can they go up again in the future? Definitely, right? So how do we fight off inflation? Everything you're not using in a safe bucket and in for income, you should be growing that in the market for future use, right? Inflation. The fifth one that I think sticks out the most is market risk, right?
Yep.
For retirees, they probably set up their 401k, 403b, or 457, TSP, whatever it may be, in their 20s, right? When they first got into the workforce. Market has done well since then, and now they're sitting on a nice size account. But the question is, can we take that same amount of risk in retirement? The answer is probably not, right? Because we don't have the time it takes to recover if the market were to crash or correct.
Yeah.
So that's what we call sequence of returns risk. Well, what if the market were to crash the first 3 years of your retirement experience? That can have a huge damaging effect on the outcome of your portfolio, right? Imagine you're taking 4 or 5%, whatever you're taking out on your portfolio, but the market also comes down, right? 20%. So now you're selling at a loss, and you have to address that market risk. As we record this in 2025, we always ask our clients, do we feel the market is undervalued, properly priced, or overvalued? Where would we say we are?
From the uneducated person outside looking in, I would say it's overvalued, but I don't think that's an
It is. You're right,
educated
Mike.
guess.
It is an educated. It feels overvalued. I mean, we just hit all-time highs a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
For all the listeners out there, I want you guys to Google the Warren Buffett indicator. And the Oracle of Omaha, right? Warren Buffett has this cool indicator. It says anything above 135% tells us that the market is overvalued. As of today, we're sitting at over 195%, right? So we're not saying sell everything and go into safe assets. We're not saying that. We're saying proceed with caution and make sure your portfolio is reflective of your risk tolerance and your goals, right? And lastly, taxes, everybody's favorite topic, right? Taxes are one of those things that really hasn't changed. We're in a historically low tax bracket, even though it doesn't feel like it. But after World War II, the highest income tax bracket was 90%. It's kind of crazy to hear, right? If you fell into that income level. And then new administration started to cut taxes. But now our country is sitting at over $37 trillion in national debt, right? And there's been talks of a government shutdown and whatnot. So as we see, the government's hurting for money, right? So do we think taxes can go up in the future? I think that's a possibility. Do they stay the same, go down, or go up, right?
I kind of think it like this. Obviously, I would guess go up, mainly because one of the driving indicators of why taxes would go up is the deficit, which is huge and growing, and then government spending, which even though we had some Doge, activity, I think government spending still will stay as it always has. So probably taxes aren't going to go down very much. It's probably going to go up.
Correct. Taxes are probably going to go up, right? You talked about the national deficit. Right now, we're adding about $1 trillion every 100 days in national debt, which is insane.
Wow.
So how do we prepare for something like that? For a lot of retirees listening in today, I would say 70 to 80% of their money is in tax deferred accounts, 401ks that haven't been taxed yet, right? But I want you guys to ask yourselves a question. Well, what are taxes going to be in 10, 15 years when maybe RMDs start kicking in, those required minimum distributions? Do we get to pay taxes on today's rates or on future rates? Right? You're paying taxes on future rates where we don't know where they are.
Yeah.
So a part of tax planning is like, well, maybe we should do some Roth conversions and be in control of the situation, right? Pay the taxes today and let our money grow tax-free and access tax-free. So we have a lot of different strategies that make sense when we're doing tax planning, but every situation is different, right? So those are the 6 major risks: longevity, mortality, liquidity, inflation, market risk, and taxes.
As you listed those out and talked through a few of those, it struck me that most of them we have no control over at all, right? Like inflation, we can't control that. Taxes, we can't control that. But some of them, like liquidity, we can control because we can make sure we have access to our cash. Like what if you ever, it reminds me of the saying, house rich and cash poor. Hey, I own 5 rental properties. They're all paid in full. Got some good cash flow, but I can't grab 20 grand out of that right away. You'd have to take some time. So I think that liquidity is such a huge overlooked one, in my opinion.
Definitely not modeled in enough. And I think a lot of advisors actually overlook both liquidity and I think inflation. A lot of advisors probably talk about market risk, that's kind of their MO. But inflation is one of those sneaky ones that if you don't look out for, it can really hamper down your portfolio, right?
Talk a little bit more about long-term care, because I think when you've been really good about talking about statistics, and I've heard a statistic that's staggering, something like 60 or 65% of all people at some point will have some kind of need for long-term care. And if that number you threw out of 8,000 or above per month, boy, if you're not prepared for that, that's crippling.
Definitely. You're right on the money. So it's actually 70% of Americans are going to need long-term care at some point in their
Wow.
life. 70%. The average cost is about $10,000 a month. That's about $120,000 a year, right? But the crazy thing is that's today. Most of our listeners today are probably not going to need long-term care today or tomorrow. They're probably going to need it when? 10, 15 years from now. And
Sure.
the same thing we're asking, do we think long-term care costs are going to go up or down in the future?
I
It's
would
probably going to
only
go up.
assume up. Yeah.
Yeah. Unless you got healthcare workers taking lower wages in 10 years, I highly doubt that. Are devices and equipment going to be cheaper? No, right? So what can that balloon up to in 10, 15 years? Now, there are 3 ways to pay for it. I would say, well, technically 4. The first one, most listeners not going to qualify for, which is government assistance. The first way is what you call self-insurance, which is to say, hey, if I need this long-term care need, I have a $3 million portfolio, I'll just carve out, $500,000-$600,000, right? Away for this expense. Most Americans probably won't go down that road unless they're liquid enough. The second way is a traditional long-term care policy. It used to be very popular. There's only 3 carriers that even do it. The challenge with traditional long-term care is if you don't use it, you lose it, and premiums can go up in the future, right? What has become very popular is what's called a 7702 plan, where it's a combination of life insurance and long-term care. This is where, hey, you have a $500,000 policy. If you pass away and you never use the long-term care aspect of it, your family gets a check, right? But if you need it for long-term care, let's say you use $300,000 and you pass away, well, your family can still get a check for approximately $200,000. And for the most part, premiums are fixed. So I would say that's become very popular, asset-based and 7702 plans. Clients ask us which is best. We can't say which is best. It all depends on your unique situation.
Yeah.
Right? And then we make the recommendation. So we have a whole long-term care life insurance division just for that part of our planning.
Because from what I have heard, a standalone long-term care policy is quite expensive, and if it's either use it or lose it. So if you didn't need it, you kept paying those premiums versus what you just described, where it's inside of a different kind of a tool. And if you need it, it's there. If you didn't, you're not out the premium.
Yes. Here's a real life example. I have clients out in, I believe they're in Washington. Their premiums went up by 50% over 2 years.
Wow.
Mind you, they're on fixed income, right? And at that one point, they just threw it up and they're like, we can't afford this anymore. We're just going to let it go. And that hurts. They've been paying for these policies for well over 15, sometimes 20 years, right? There's no cash value on some of these policies. So it's something you have to consider and has to be a part of the conversation. We like to say, no retirement plan is complete without addressing long-term care.
Yeah.
Because it becomes a tax on your portfolio. And if you really don't prepare for it, who has to foot the bill? Your kids,
Yeah.
right? And then you start having those hard conversations like, I wish mom and dad planned for this. Like these conversations start to come about. You don't want that.
When you describe it like that, it makes me think of something else. When you plan the right way and when you make sure that long-term care is taken care of, and if you didn't need the long-term care provision, it's still there. That's wonderful. But when you have all of those I's dotted and T's crossed, it becomes a real gift to your heirs and your family because there's no loose ends. People aren't scrambling around going, what do we do with this? And, oh, now we don't know what to do or where's the fun. I think that it feels like work to put together a plan and to think all these things. You don't want to think about the end, of course, but when you do it, you can kind of breathe that sigh of relief and go, okay, I got a plan here. And it's a gift to my family.
Yes, I think you bring up a
doesn't
great
that
point.
give confidence, clarity, right? Not only now, but also later. Back, like as an example, you've said we don't know what to expect. What if your mental faculties kind of decline down the road? Well, maybe now is the time to put these things in place. So talk a little bit about the clarity and confidence and peace of mind that this provides families.
Definitely. I remember there's this long-term care company that had a campaign. It really struck a chord with a lot of our clients. It was a life insurance policy that also provided long-term care provisions. And they said, we don't call it life insurance, we call it love insurance. And that really
Mm,
hit a chord with a lot of our clients. Like, you know what? By securing this plan now, it's showing my family how much I love them, that I've prepared for this, that when that time comes, we can just focus on my care and not have to worry about the financial planning aspect of it, right?
yeah.
And ultimately, it gives you the second L word is legacy. How do you
Mhm.
want to be remembered? And how, a lot of the times when we're talking about long-term care, statistically, I think 80% of people after the long-term care is probably there towards the end of the road, right? So how do you want to be remembered? What kind of legacy do you want to leave to your kids and grandkids? You know?
That's
And it gives you
huge.
that confidence and peace of mind that no matter what happens, you're prepared. In an earlier episode we worked on together, we talked about how, when you don't plan, you can go into financial chaos, right? But when you
Mhm.
do plan, you have peace of mind. It just makes those, I would say, like those trips, those cruises, those trips to Italy even that much sweeter because, hey, whatever happens, we're good. We thought
Yep.
about this. I think a part of that would be estate planning, right? To say, hey, if I lose my faculties, I have an executor for my trust. This is exactly what I want to happen. I have my medical directives. Like all these things should be planned out, right?
100%. You mentioned briefly, just kind of in passing, a software that you use. So talk a little bit about how you quantify some of these recommendations that you're learning from your clients and how, the numbers are displayed in a software.
Sure. So earlier we talked about those 6 risks, longevity, mortality, and so on and so
Hmm.
forth. Well, once we identify them, the first meeting is what we call our envision meeting. This is your first trip to the doctor's office. We're saying, hey, tell us a little bit about your background, right? What are your goals? What matters to you? What are your fears? What are your past experiences? That typically lasts about an hour. Once we have the right data, the right information, your goals, your statements, then we get to work, right? It takes us about approximately a week to build out a full retirement plan. It takes over 8 hours. And we have a whole planning team, consists of about 10 planners, gets double checked by other advisors. And then we also feed this into industry leading software we call Retirement Analyzer. And this software does a lot of great things. It can stress test against inflation. It can model in a market crash. It models in, well, what if a long-term care needs when takes place when I'm 75 or 80? What if my spouse were to pass away? How does it affect my portfolio? Right? And then it compiles in Social Security income, pension income, all these things gets detailed into this really strong report so that you can make educated and confident decisions, right? There's a saying, people lie, numbers don't. And we like to rely
Yep.
on the numbers to say, hey, this is what the data is telling us versus saying, hey, trust me, this is going to last for life. Like, hey, I like you,
Mm.
but I need more than that, So we back it up with numbers. And so when you're working with a team, obviously you're looking for software that's backing them. You're looking for experience and expertise. And I think another important aspect of it is access to investment options and partners. If I'm pigeonholed and I'm stuck to, oh, I can only offer you these investments, we're in a tough
Yeah.
position. Because what if there's something better out there, but I can't offer you that, so I'm not going to recommend that, you know? But we have access to essentially all types of investments, so then we can make the proper recommendations for your retirement plan. It really comes into the picture of our process and our approach, right?
That's huge. Well, I tell you, this has been really, really eye-opening. And I think that a lot of people might be thinking, how would this look for me? Run that software for me. What's the best way someone can learn a little more and then also reach out and connect with you?
Sure. So as important as the planning aspect is, you want a team that can actually implement it, right? Implementation is just as important as planning. And if you do this right, it should be a for life decision because a retirement plan is a living, breathing plan. Things change. Trips take place. Maybe your kids go to college and you want to help them out there, or maybe you're downsizing and your finances change. You know, implementation and evaluation has to be a constant process, right? And so the best ways to reach us, you can find us online. Check out our website. It's www.goldlinewealthmanagement.com. Or if you'd like to reach out and set up an appointment, you can email us directly at jordan@goldline-financial.com.
Excellent. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for coming back on. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.